In the Atlantic Ocean, a mysterious sailing ship was once discovered drifting at sea. It hadn't been attacked by pirates. It hadn't exploded. It hadn't sunk beneath the waves. The food was still on board. The fresh water remained untouched. The cargo was almost completely intact. Only one thing was missing: the 10 people aboard. There were no bodies, no distress signal, and no one has ever discovered what happened to them. The ship would later become known as the world's most famous ghost ship, the Mary Celeste. More than 150 years have passed, yet the case remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in maritime history. Even today, no one knows what those 10 people experienced. Let's go back to 1872. On November 7th, 1872, a two-masted merchant brig named Mary Celeste departed from New York Harbor, bound for Genoa, Italy. Few people know that this wasn't the ship's original name.
She was launched in 1861 as the Amazon. Over the following decade, she witnessed the death of her first captain, was involved in collisions, ran aground, changed owners several times, and was eventually renamed Mary Celeste. Later, many people would describe her as a cursed ship. But in 1872, no one could have imagined that this voyage would make her famous forever. The captain was Benjamin Briggs, a 37-year-old veteran mariner. Joining him on the voyage were his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. Along with them were 7 crew members. In total, there were 10 people on board. Their cargo consisted of more than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. If everything went according to plan, they would arrive in Italy within a few weeks. For the next several days, everything appeared perfectly normal. According to the ship's log, the voyage continued as planned, with no unusual events. Then came the final entry. It was dated November 25th, 1872. The log placed the ship near the Azores, just a few hundred kilometers from where she would eventually be found. After that,
the record simply stopped. No one knows what happened aboard the Mary Celeste during the following 9 days. Then, on December 5th, another British merchant ship, the Dei Gratia, spotted a vessel drifting across the Atlantic. No distress flag had been raised. Its course appeared erratic. Its sails hung loosely from the masts as it drifted aimlessly across the sea. Sensing that something was wrong, the captain of the Dei Gratia ordered several crew members to board the ship. What they found stunned everyone. There was no captain, no crew, no young mother, no little child. All 10 people had vanished. Yet, what made the discovery truly unsettling wasn't that the ship was empty. It was that everything looked as though its occupants had only stepped away moments before. There was enough food on board to last for months. Most of the fresh water remained untouched. The crew's clothing and personal belongings were still where they had been left. Nearly the entire cargo of industrial alcohol was still on board. Even the ship herself remained seaworthy. After a brief inspection, investigators concluded that with only minor repairs, she could have completed the voyage.
And yet, every person aboard had disappeared. Investigators soon noticed several strange details. The ship's lifeboat was missing. So were the sextant and the marine chronometer. These were among the most important navigation instruments on any ocean voyage. Which meant whoever abandoned the ship hadn't left in a panic without preparation. At the very least, they believed they were going to survive. So what could have convinced an experienced captain to abandon a ship that was still capable of sailing? The Mary Celeste was later towed to Gibraltar, where British authorities launched an official investigation.
At first, investigators didn't believe it had been an accident. They suspected murder. Their attention quickly turned to the crew of the Dei Gratia. Could they have killed everyone aboard the Mary Celeste? Then pretended to discover an abandoned ship in order to claim the salvage reward? At first, the theory seemed plausible, but as the investigation continued, no blood, no bodies, and no signs of a struggle were found. There was also no evidence that the two ships had ever come into conflict. In the end, the accusation was completely dismissed. That left investigators with an even greater mystery. If it wasn't murder, then where had those 10 people gone? From that moment on, countless theories emerged in an attempt to explain the fate of the Mary Celeste. The first theory, the alcohol vapor theory. The first theory, and the one most widely accepted today, is the alcohol vapor theory. Many people overlook one important detail. The Mary Celeste wasn't carrying ordinary liquor. She was transporting more than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. After the investigation, officials discovered that 9 barrels were empty. Later studies suggested that those barrels had been made of red oak, which was more likely to leak than the white oak used for most of the others. This means alcohol could have slowly leaked into the cargo hold, filling it with highly flammable vapor. According to this theory, Captain Briggs may have noticed the strong smell of alcohol and feared that an explosion was about to occur. He ordered everyone to take the navigation instruments and temporarily leave the ship in the lifeboat. The plan was likely to tow the lifeboat behind the Mary Celeste and return once the danger had passed. But if the tow line snapped in rough seas, the lifeboat would have drifted away.
While the Mary Celeste continued sailing on her own, this theory explains several of the case's biggest mysteries. Why the lifeboat disappeared, why the navigation instruments were missing, and why the food, fresh water, and cargo were all left behind. In 2006, an experiment provided some support for this theory. Researchers found that alcohol vapor could produce a brief explosion powerful enough to create a loud blast without leaving obvious burn marks. If Captain Briggs heard such a blast, he may have believed a much larger explosion was about to follow. Even so, there is still no direct evidence that alcohol actually leaked, or that such an explosion ever occurred. It remains the most widely accepted explanation, but not the final answer.
The second theory, pump failure. Investigators later found signs that the ship's bilge pump had been dismantled for maintenance. According to this theory, if the pump stopped working, Captain Briggs would have had no reliable way to determine how much water had entered the ship. Combined with rough weather and heavy seas, he may have believed the vessel was about to sink. So he ordered everyone to abandon ship. But when the Mary Celeste was eventually found, there was only a small amount of water inside, nowhere near enough to sink her. If this theory is correct, then what doomed them may not have been the ocean, but a fatal mistake.
The third theory, pirates or mutiny. The third theory suggests that the Mary Celeste was attacked by pirates, or that the crew mutinied against Captain Briggs. But the evidence tells a different story. Investigators found no blood, no bodies, no signs of violence. The cargo and valuables were still on board. There was also no evidence that Captain Briggs had ever been in serious conflict with his crew. For these reasons, neither theory has gained much support. Over the years, countless supernatural stories have also emerged. Some claim the crew encountered a sea monster. Others believe they were taken by extraterrestrials or disappeared into some unknown force. But none of these stories has ever been supported by evidence. More than 150 years have passed. Countless theories have been proposed. Yet not a single one can explain every mystery surrounding the Mary Celeste. Perhaps they believed they were leaving the ship for only a few minutes, never imagining they would never return. And perhaps the real answer disappeared along with the missing lifeboat, somewhere in the vast Atlantic Ocean. Because everyone who knew the truth disappeared with it.